and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us as we take a close look at some improvements coming to the reports functionality in ArchivesSpace. Please note this webinar is being recorded. Generating reports is an essential tool to reflect on productivity and prioritize workflows. However, running reports within the ArchivesSpace staff interface has been a challenge that often produced inadequate results. Many community members have established a variety of highly technical and creative workarounds to generate reports externally from the staff user interface. However, development persisted on to improve the functionalities of reports within the native application. Junior software developer Sarah Morrissey has focused on refactoring and improving how reports can be generated in ArchivesSpace. In this webinar, Sarah will demonstrate the improvements in reports functionalities and also provide some insight on the technical challenges she faced. Sarah worked in close collaboration with ArchivesSpace technical lead Lainey McGlowan, as well as the ArchivesSpace User Advisory Council Reports subteam. The Reports subteam advances the ArchivesSpace Reports module by defining reports conceptually and technically, documenting how to use the Reports module, and suggesting enhancements to the report processes. Recommendations made by the subteam are available on their wiki page. Presenting today, we have Sarah Morrissey, Junior Software Engineer for ArchivesSpace. Sarah is a computer science student at Georgia Tech with a particular interest in data management. She has worked on the ArchivesSpace program team as a co-op student over the past year, working on a variety of technical projects including the Archivist Toolkit migration tool, the Archon migration tool, an ArchivesSpace Windows installer, and improving the reports functionalities in ArchivesSpace. We'll hold for questions at the end. Take it away, Sarah.
Thank you for that introduction, Kim, and thank you everyone for attending. I'm just going to try and tell you a little about what I've been working on reports, what I've done, and how that's going to impact your ability to use reports. So before I start, just give you a little outline of what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to start by talking about my goals when I was refactoring the reports, what I was hoping to achieve. And then I'll give you a demo of what the canned reports now look like. That's the predefined reports. And then I'll give you a brief technical overview of what I had to do from a technical perspective in order to get reports to where they are now. And then I will actually give you some insight onto what we're looking towards in the future for reports. I've started work on creating a custom reports capability, which is not yet ready, but I'm going to give you a brief demo of what that may look like in the future. And then at the end, we will hold for questions. So when I was looking at refactoring the reports, first and foremost, the goal was for them to run reliably, for you to actually be able to run reports, which seems like a very minimal goal, but this has not been the case in the past. So that was the starting point. We wanted to make sure that they run without crashing reliably. And then after that, we want to make sure all the different formats of the reports have the same data in them. So whether you generate a PDF or some JSON data, it's going to be the same data. Again, this had not always been the case in the past, but that was one of the goals for refactoring the reports. After that, we got into wanting the data to be useful data that is actually useful for an archivist. And for that, I worked a lot with the reports subteam. They gave me a lot of good ideas and insight into how archivists use these reports, and so how ideally they would look in order to maximize their utility to an archivist. after that, I wanted to make it to where the reports were more maintainable, because inevitably we're going to need to add new reports and things will change and the needs will change. So we wanted it to be easy to make further additions or changes to the reports. And then looking towards the future, something we realized is that not everyone's going to do things exactly the same way. So to allow for that, as I mentioned before, work has started on offering a custom reports capability. So if one of the canned reports doesn't offer exactly what you want, there will in the future be a capability to create your own template for a report that can be more specific to your specific situation and what you want. So I'm going to do a brief demo and show you what the canned reports now look like, give an example of that. And these updates are coming very soon. They should be in the next release, so you can look for them. So to run a report, you first select Reports from the Gear drop-down menu. It will bring you to this page, which shows a listing of all the different report types. And on this page, there's a Show Description button, which will toggle showing a brief description of the report and any parameters for that specific report. All of them will have a format, so you'll choose which format you want the report to be in. Some of them will also have other things like date created or something, a parameter you can pass in to narrow your report. In this case, it only has format. So we're going to select the report you want to run. So in this case, we're going to run a shelf list report, which is something new with the refactoring. It's a new type of report that's been added in. So then once you press select, it's going to bring you to this page where you will select your format and any other parameters, as I mentioned before, but in this case, it's just format. So we'll select HTML in this example. And then you're going to press Queue Job. So it'll bring you here where it's going to say running, and it may take a few minutes depending on which report you're running. Some of them take longer than others. But when it's done, it will prompt you to refresh the page. And once you do that, you'll see something like this. And you will click on the link under Files to download the report. And when you open it, in this case, it looks something like that. So note that at the top, it shows some general metadata about the report. It shows the title of which type of report it was. In this case, it's a shelf list report. And it also shows the repository that this report was scoped by. Sometimes this will also show, for instance, how many records you have, the total extent of the records in the report, or some other parameters in that section. So then here's some samples of what the records look like in this shelf list report. So you can see you have some general information, and then you have a subsection with all the resources and the containers. There's a little bit more examples of that. And as I said, you can also generate it in other formats, and all the formats have the same data. But this is an example of what that report would have looked like if we had chose to generate a JSON format report. This is the CSV version. Now you actually have two CSV options. So one of them breaks out all the linked records. It breaks out each of the fields for each of the linked record types. And in that option, you can end up with duplicate data, but it makes the CSV easier to sort and such. But you also have another option if you don't want any duplicate records, where you can keep any linked records all in the same cell. This is a sample of what the PDF looks like. So you see you have the same header that shows the title and any metadata like the repository. And then you can see the PDF looks mostly the same as the HTML. So that concludes the demo. Now I'm going to go into a little bit of technical overview of what I did to refactor the reports and get them to this point. So one thing I changed is we decided that it would be best to use raw SQL queries to generate the reports. We figured that would be easier for future developers to understand, even if they have minimal background in Ruby or something like that. If they know SQL, that's the main requirement for being able to add reports. And so that goes with maintainability. That will make it easier to add more reports. So the way the reports work is they each define their query, and then they can also do some data cleanup. For instance, you can converts Boolean values that were 0 and 1, it converts them to yes or no, which is nicer to read in the final product. And it can add sub-reports, which are your linked records. And the goal for this was there's minimal responsibility on the part of the individual reports, but there's maximum flexibility. And another interesting thing is the sub-reports can have as many nested sub-reports as they want. So for instance, in the Schultz report, you saw you have linked resources and linked to sessions, but within those, you also have containers that are linked to those. So it's simple to add further levels of nested data. And so another thing with making it easier to add reports, making it more maintainable, is that a generic template is used to generate all the HTML and PDF formats for the reports. Before, you had to add a new one for each new report you created. Now, one template handles all of that. So all you really had to do to add a new report is to define the query and do any data cleanup you want. So now I'm going to do a demo of the custom reports, where they are at now. To reiterate, these are not ready yet. They will not be in the next release, but this will give a little bit of an idea of where reports are going in the future. So to generate a custom report, you would go and choose custom report templates. So you can create a template. That's in the gear drop-down menu again. And then you'd see a listing of all your custom report templates where you can edit or delete them from. And then you'd press create template. And in this case, the example we're going to do is something you might want is showing the identifier, title, a session date, and collection management fields for all the session with the session dates in 2017 that were created by a particular user. In this case, will be administrator, and it will be sorted by a session date. So to accomplish this, you select your record type first. So we'd select the sessions, and then all the other fields will change based on which record type you select. And then you'll scroll down, and we want to show a session date. We want to display it. We also want to narrow our results by the accession date, so we only see the accessions with the session dates in 2017. So we'll select narrow by. Then our start date will be the January 1st, 2017. And the end date will be December 31st, 2017. And now, like that, the results will be narrowed to sessions with the session dates in 2017. Then we'd want to display the identifier in this case, and we want to display the title. We want to narrow the results by who created the session. So we don't really need to display it since we only want to see the ones that were created by administrator. So we know that if it's in the report, it was created by administrator. So we'll just select narrow by, and then for values, we will select administrator. You could select multiple users, but in this case, we just want to see the ones that were created by that one user. And then you have options to show different linked records types. So in this case, we'll show the collection management fields. And you can select what field you want to sort by. So we'll sort by the session date. And then you can save the template, which will bring you back to this page, and select reports from the drop-down menu. And now custom reports will be listed as a report type on this page. So scroll down until you find it. It's right there. And then you press select. And then we will select the template we just created, which is a sessions created by administrator. Select the format as we'll do HTML again. And then you queue the job. And when it's done, download the report. And then this one looks something like this. So if we notice the header info, we see how it was narrowed. In this case, it was narrowed by a session date between those two dates, and it was narrowed by who created the session, which was admin. And we see how many results. We had 25 results. So there are 25 sessions with session dates in 2017 that were created by admin. And we see the repository once again. And then this just further down, you can see we have the collection management fields if the session has them. And then that concludes that demo. So now I will take some time for any questions.
Thank you, Sarah, for demonstrating some of the improvements in reports that we'll be seeing in the upcoming release as well as future releases. We will now open up the floor for any questions or comments. And feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question, or you can also use the chat box.
I have a question. In the past, some of the reports might have worked, but maybe the database was too big and it took so long that you'd give up because everything would freeze. Has that been addressed?
Yes. So they're still going to take somewhat longer depending on how big your database is. But in general, they take much less time, and they shouldn't ever really just completely crash. That shouldn't really ever happen anymore. The longest report tends to take, may take up to a few minutes. That's the resources instances report, can get really big and can take a few minutes. But in general, the amount of time they take has been significantly decreased. What version do you need to access the custom reports feature? It is not released yet. It's going to require a lot more testing before it's ready to be released. There is a reports branch testing site where you can see that feature on, and where the community can test it if you are interested. Will it be possible to report of all archival objects with a specific extent type? I'm not sure that would probably fall under the umbrella of when the custom reports get up and running. Eventually that may be possible. I don't think it is yet. You will be able to do various reports of archival objects and possibly narrow them by different fields. Can you run a report sorting on a field in user-defined fields? Again, that's not available yet, but that would be a great idea for the custom reports. The idea is kind of anything that's very particular will be a future feature for custom reports. Is there any way to run a report that pulls data across different repositories? At this point, no, there's not. All the reports are narrowed by repository. And will the custom reports allow for inclusion of the user-defined fields? Yes, they will. That will be an option under linked records. Will there be another way to add your own queries besides using the staff interface to create a custom report, an API endpoint? There will be an API endpoint for the custom reports when those come out. But that will be kind of limited to, you'll still have to define it in the way the custom reports are defined, but there will be an API endpoint to define that. Have any changes been made to data included in the download CSV available in search results and browse screens? I can't really speak to that. I'm unsure. The CSVs under reports have been changed to where they include data more consistent with the other reports. So how can you add your own raw SQL? So the raw SQL is used in the canned reports, the predefined reports. It may be a good idea to add a way to add an easier way to write them in that format. Right now, in order to add a report, it would have to go into the release.
Thanks, everyone. Any other questions about upcoming features in reports? If we have specific questions about reporting issues, is there someone we could contact? Definitely, you could reach out to the ArchivesSpace program team. You can email us at archivespacehome@lyrasis.org. I will put that in the chat box. The other thing you can do is we have the report sub-team, and they are the ones that really prioritize all of the issues that need to get worked out. But if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at archivespacehome@lyrasis.org. And any other questions or comments after this webinar, feel free to reach out to us as well. Thank you all for joining us today for this webinar, and thank you especially to Sarah Morrissey for all of your preparation and all the work you did to improve the report's functionalities. We're all really looking forward to seeing these improvements come up in the next release. The recording of this webinar will be available soon. Thank you all and have a great afternoon.